How many harp strings should you get if you're buying a pedal harp? Excellent question, and the topic of today's Harp Tuesday episode. So this was a question that a viewer posted as a comment on one of my videos, and I thought it was worth exploring. Now, just like the question of what harp should I get, it's impossible for me to tell you specifically what to do because that's going to be very individualistic. It's going to depend on a lot of different factors. But I can give you some information and thoughts, and hopefully that might prove useful. And I guess here I'm kind of feel that I'm speaking to someone who maybe has a lever harp and is looking to get a pedal harp, or someone maybe who just doesn't have a harp but is going to go ahead and get a pedal harp, though I would in that case mention that lever harp is a great option to start with as well, and lever harps generally are much less expensive. So this right here is a 47 string Layne and Healy style 30. And 47 strings from this low C to this high G is sort of the standard full-size pedal harp. That's the largest number of strings you will find. Do these strings get used, right? Well, yes, they do. Certainly in classical music, you can be sure that if a range of an instrument exists, there will be composers writing music that includes those low notes and those high notes. But at the same time, they don't get played that often. So at the moment of the music that I'm working on, I'm not actually playing anything with a low D and with a low C, but I am playing something with a high G, but that could change. I could be working on a different program and be using that C and the D, but maybe not the high G, maybe not the high F or something like that. And certainly there is a lot of classical repertoire that you can play that fits within a smaller range than this. These low notes, of course, they're nice to have. Same as the high notes. But are they essential? Well, it's going to depend. And so that's kind of what we're going to explore here. And in general, I guess my philosophy, my personal preference would be I'd rather have the notes available and not need them rather than need them and not have them. But of course, your mileage may vary. And so I think certainly as a soloist or an orchestral musician, you need those 47 strings. Almost certainly. But otherwise, maybe yes, maybe no. And so partly that might depend on the repertoire that you're planning to play. And so, for example, certainly traditional Celtic music doesn't need these. But maybe you're doing your own take on that and you want some of this low bass, all about the bass. So what would lead you to want a smaller harp or want a full-size 47-string harp? And I think the first factor I want to talk about is ergonomics, because I think that potentially might dictate your choice and could be very important. So it might be that if you're quite short, you might find that it's most comfortable to get a smaller size pedal harp. It makes it easier to reach the pedals, might just in general be more comfortable to play. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be able to play a 47-string harp, and some 47-string harps are bigger or feel bigger than others. But so this again is where, like, if you get a chance to try stuff out, that can really help inform things. But it's something to keep in mind that if you're particularly short, you might find that a smaller harp is going to be perfect. On the flip side, if you're particularly tall, you might need a bigger harp, a full-sized pedal harp. So I'm 6'2", almost 6'2", and I remember doing a concert on a Kamak Clio, which is a 44-string harp, and that was literally too small for me because the problem was, in order for me to sit so that it was resting comfortably on my shoulder, that I wasn't way up here, right? I was able to play comfortably here. I had to have my chair so low that my knees were quite a bit above my hips, making changing pedals very hard, and of course would be terrible long-term for my back. So in that case for me, then ergonomically that just wouldn't be an option, right? I need a bigger harp. So that's both of those factors that are then really important to keep in mind in terms of size. And then also the ergonomics of moving it around. So this is something where you get a lot of professional harpists who want a gig harp, for example, a harp that is easy to move around to weddings, background music, where, yeah, you're not playing all this maybe classical recital repertoire, and so you don't need all of this range, right? You can do some great stuff in and it's more portable. So that might then be a reason to get a smaller harp. So then the next factor, I think, is price, right? That because then you might say, well, yeah, I'm not aspiring to play all this super hard recital repertoire. I'm going to be just fine hanging out in this region, and why spend money on these extra strings if I don't have to? Which is a perfectly valid reason, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the current offerings of Layne, Healy, Shelby, and Kamak and look at sort of the cost to go from a smaller harp to a 47 string harp, and is that worth it or not, right? But before I do, I want to talk about sort of 3 topics around that. And first is that the 47 string harp, just because the body, the soundboard is bigger, and the sound box is bigger, it can offer potentially a bigger and maybe better sound than a smaller harp. And so that even if you're just playing in this region, it might be that having that 47 strings and more strings for sympathetic vibration, unless that, assuming you want that, that might potentially be kind of worth it just for itself, even if you never play these notes. Second, something very important is that I think most pedal harps, the way the mechanism is designed is that the last 2 strings don't have any discs on them, which means that they're fixed pitch. So if you want to change the tuning, you have to actually tune them. You can't use the pedals to do that. So right now, for example, this C is tuned to C natural, which it almost always is. And this D is currently tuned to D flat, though there are often pieces that require a D natural. So in order to do that, I would have to retune it. And that means, of course, that if I would try to avoid programming a piece that has a D flat and also a piece that has a low D natural. And if I do, I'd make sure they're on different halves of a program so I could tune in the intermission. So that is not so bad in this case on this low C and D, because again, they aren't played that frequently. But it could be really annoying, for example, let's say this A has no discs on it. Well, there's a lot of A flats and a lot of A naturals in pieces, and now you have to retune if you want to have those 2. So that's actually kind of restrictive. So that's a case where maybe even if you never play this C and D, but what it does is it means that there are discs on this low E, so you get an E flat and an E natural and an E sharp too if you want it easily just through the pedals. So that's an effect that having those more strings can bring even if you're not using that full range. Some pedal harps don't have discs on maybe the top or maybe in the top 2. So again, it's worth checking if you're eyeing a particular harp. Just notice where the discs start. So that's again really important. And then finally, I guess, is you'll see there are certainly of the new current offering models, there aren't a lot of options. And so for Layne, Healy, and Shelby, the only options are in their sort of, I guess, less expensive line. And in general, it's a rough barometer. You can say that you get what you pay for in terms of sound, that the more expensive a harp is, in general, the better it will sound. Now, of course, especially with some of the gold harps, you're also paying for the look and for the cosmetics. But in general, yeah, the more expensive the harp is, the better the sound is. And again, each harp, you can get the same model. You can get 10 harps all the same model, but each of those harps could sound different. And so one might sound really great and one might sound not so great, and all ranges in between. But again, I think that is a decent barometer in lieu of actually being able to try the harp and play it. And so that means that because of the limited number of options of smaller harps, you might end up getting a 47-string harp, not because you need or want all of these range, but because you want that sound. So if you like the look and the sound of a Style 30, your only option is to get a 47-string Style 30. There's no smaller option, so we don't get to kind of specifically say, oh, well, okay, I don't think I'm going to need this. I don't need this as well, or this. We can't pick and choose. there are very few options. So that also kind of affects our choices, not just the sort of value option of, okay, I want this particular model and I only need X number of strings. So let's look at the current offerings. And let's start with Layne and Shelby. And as I mentioned, they have a 40 string, both companies have a 40 string model. And what does that mean? So that means we're losing 7 strings. So we're losing the top 2, the F and the G, and we're losing the C, D, E, F, and G down here. So we start from this low A. I don't mind so much losing these top 2, right? I think that's reasonable. I don't mind so much the bottom 2, the C and the D, but I would definitely miss that E. I mean, I would miss all of them, of course, but that E and the F and the G to me are all really lovely notes and notes that I might want to include. So it's and again, you might have a lever harp that has 40 strings, so you would get a sense of, are you craving some of those lower notes or those higher notes, or are you perfectly happy with that? Again, it does also have that effect of no discs, I believe, on the A and the B. So that's another factor as well that kind of, again, even squeezes your range a little bit more. But anyway, let's look. So the Layne Healy is the Chicago 40 string harp, which is $12,500, and the Chicago Concertino then is $16,500. So that's a $4,000 difference. So that's actually fairly significant, right? And that is a kind of compelling reason, if you think you'd be happy with 40 strings, to get the smaller harp, that you are paying quite a premium there to go up to 47 strings. As a contrast, if you look at the Daphne, the Shelby Daphne, $1,350 for the 40 string, but then was it almost $15,000 for the 47 string straight soundboard. That, $1,500 more for 47 strings, that looks like a pretty attractive option to me, right? That if at all possible, I would find a way to get that extra $1,500 and go ahead and get the 47 strings. Now, one other factor though, if you're in North America, Layne Healy and Shelby have a bounty program where if you get one of the 40 string models, so the Chicago or the Daphne 40, within the next 5 years, you can trade that full value back to them and apply that to the purchase of a new harp. So that's kind of an interesting option if you're okay, I want a pedal harp right now, and then I'm going to save over this next little while in case I want to get more strings or just a better quality harp, better sound quality, more expensive model. So that does make then the Daphne 40 maybe attractive over the 47, just for that factor, if you think that might be a factor. But again, only North America and doesn't apply to a used harp, etc., etc. So yeah, so there are your options, right? If you want that smaller one in terms of the current model that they offer. Camac is kind of interesting because they offer 3 different models of 44 string harps, not counting the electric harp, which I'm going to ignore for the moment. So 44 strings means that we have all the notes up here. We have this F and this G, and we're missing the C, D, and the E down here. So as I mentioned, I don't mind so much losing the C and the D, but I do miss the E. I would miss that E. That E is quite nice. And then again, I think we don't have discs on those lower 2, but definitely worth checking right on all these things. So that to me is actually a pretty nice compromise range that you can do a lot. You've got those top notes, you've got a pretty good bass range down there, and yet it offers you potentially that better portability and maybe a better ergonomic fit. Again, for me, too small, but potentially great. And so let's look at the prices here. So they have the Clio, which is their sort of cheapest option, and the Clio only comes as a 44 string model, I believe. So we can't directly compare that, but their current cheapest 47 string model, which is actually the Ijiri, this is their new soundboard design, which is kind of intriguing because I like the sound of it this new soundboard on their more premium, couple of premium models, that's $2,500 more. So again, obviously, like if you could try them both, that might determine the factor right there, the sound. But just looking at it on paper, it's kind of attractive to me to spend that little bit of extra money and get the 47 strings. Now, they also offer a couple of premium 44-string harps, right? Which is really kind of interesting. The Trianon and the Oriane, right? So where they exist both as a 44-string model and as a 47-string model. And in this case, it is a fair discount to get the 44-string model, right? So that what you're paying $4,000 less for the Trianon, or $6,000 less for the Oriane, if you go from the 47-string to the 44-string. At the same time, for the cost of a 44-string of either of those models, you could get a pretty nice 47-string harp, not of a specific model, but of different models. So I guess to me, I see those as being, the 44-string options here, as being not a value choice of, yes, I like this model, and I don't know that I need these extra strings, so I'm going to get the smaller model, but instead, as targeting someone who knows, again, maybe for ergonomic reasons, that they want a smaller harp and they want a really good sounding one, right? So they're getting a premium model, but with that smaller form factor. So as you can see, there's not a ton of options in terms of current new harps. Now, there are used harps. So in the past, I think actually Kamak still makes a 46-string model, and certainly in the past, both Shelby and Layne and Healy, there's lots of 46-string models where it just misses that low C. So again, if you're a soloist or orchestral musician, yes, you still probably want that C, but for most people, you're not going to miss it. As you get to sort of older generation Layne and Healy's, you might be able to find a 45-string model, I think. And certainly as you go back in time, and the Wurlitzers as well here in North America, the harps in general just feel a little bit smaller and lighter. So again, for ergonomics, that could be a good option. You still get a 47 or 46-string harp, but have it feel a little bit lighter. And again, I think used harps in general can be really quite a great option. There's also, of course, Erard harps, often restored, maybe new soundboard or whatever in them, but with a wide variety of number of strings, and again, lighter and smaller. So these are all great options to look at. And then there's also, I want to mention something that you might not be aware of, but there's the Tyrolean single action harps in Austria and Bavaria. So these are kind of an intriguing option because they're single action, right? So instead of two sets of discs, they only have one. So just like a lever harp, you tune them to the key of E flat, and then you have that range. So you don't quite have the full possibilities that a double action offers you. But if you're someone who maybe, again, plays a lever harp, and you're not necessarily looking for extra range, but you are playing music where you really wish you could create these accidentals without having to change the levers to be able to keep playing and use the feet to create the accidentals, then these could be an interesting option because, again, it was one example of a 36-string single-action Tyrolean harp that is about 6,300 euros, which makes it about, let's say, 6,700 US. So that could be an intriguing option. Okay, so can I sum all of this up? Let me try. So let's see. First of all, if you need a 47-string harp, so again, if you're an aspiring soloist or aspiring orchestral musician, you probably need a 47-string harp, and you might know that, right? Like, so if you need a 47-string, if you need 47 strings, you probably know that in terms of the repertoire you're playing or want to play. So then, of course, you have to get that. On the other hand, if the ergonomics of a smaller harp are what you need, then that's what you need to get. But then, failing that, if there's nothing pushing you in one direction or the other, of course, then there's all the factors of like what's available to you, what sounds good to you. We haven't even talked about like personal preference in terms of looks, maybe. But all else being equal, and if your budget will stretch for it, in general, my feeling would be it might be worth it to spend a little bit of extra money and get a 47 string harp as opposed to 40 or a 44 string harp. Again, with that philosophy of I'd rather have the extra strings and not need them rather than need them and not have them. But yeah, of course, your mileage may vary. So I hope that was useful. I hope that was interesting. And thanks for watching. I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers. I guess I thought I would just do a quick explanation of what a pedal harp is. It's got 7 pedals at its base, and these pedals are operated by the feet to change these discs, which change the pitch or the sound of the strings. So right now this is a C, and it's tuned to C flat. It runs the length from here all the way down to the soundboard. If I put the pedal down into its middle setting, it moves these discs on all the C's, so that has the effect of shortening the string by half a step, so it becomes C natural. So here it is C flat, C natural, and then if I put the pedal down to its lowest setting, we get a C sharp, right? So it's C sharp, C natural, C flat, and all of the, here's an A flat, A natural, A sharp. So it enables you to play somewhat chromatically, and to do that without, for example, in the lever harp, having to change the levers with your hand, because you can't change the lever and also be playing at the same time. There also exist single action harps that don't have the lower set of discs, so they're tuned like a lever harp, generally to the key of E flat, and you get either, flat and natural, or the C would be tuned to C on the open string, and then C sharp with the disc engaged.